Hello ladies and gentlemen, HSRN 4.3 is apparently going to have Starward mode, which is an additional challenge to the last floors of the three endgame modes, Memories of Chaos, Apocalyptic Shadow, and Pure Fiction, with an additional reward of 100 Jades per endgame mode. Keep in mind, this is optional, meaning you can still return to the previous format of only 2 teams, with the same scoring system, but of course the rewards won't be gained that way. This video will be aiming to analyze how good the Starward mode actually is in its first iteration, because as we've discussed, these 3 endgame modes are not equal in difficulty, and Starward mode kinda just fully cements that. Keep in mind this is V1, so things might change a lot in the scoring and the amount of HP the bosses have. First of all, let's talk about MOC before Starward mode. Before Starward mode, MOC has kind of lost a lot of its punch, even though the HP is increasing as always and it is pretty bad for undeveloped accounts. Compared to everything else in the game, the amount of shilling it has is by far the tamest, and even before this year, MOC kinda has a distinction of the most sterile environment to test characters because of that. With the release of Anomaly Arbitration, MOC is an angel in comparison with its damage check and shilling. So what changes after Starward mode? You start at 45 cycles, 1 star being just clear it without any dead units, 2 star if you have 15 cycles left, so 30 cycles used, 3 star if 30 cycles left, which is 15 cycles used across your 3 teams, and for the actual final requirement which gives the Jades and the medal, it's 33 or more cycles, so you need a total of 12 cycles across 3 teams. Keep in mind that again, the 100 Jades and the medal is locked behind the last requirement. You can 2 star and 3 star, but you're not gonna get Jades for that or even the flex medal. So before we go into the actual stage, let's evaluate the scoring for MOC a bit. You need 12 cycles across 3 teams, and if you average that out, you need 4 cycles on each team, which sounds bad, but MOC's scoring system is very skewed to overperforming sides where you can carry very weak units. By that I mean, if you have even one team that's overperforming to do a 0 cycle, you have an extra 4 cycles to work with another team. And because MOC can be very strong with cycle turbulences, you can get carried by the turbulence and use weaker units that can fit the turbulence. So with a 12 cycle scoring system, you can theoretically split the cycles by 0 to 10 or 2 to 8, or if you're really crazy, 0, 0, 12. The only teams that wouldn't clear in 12 cycles with turbulences in MOC would have to be extremely weak filled with only like 1.x units that didn't get Nova Flares probably. So it's not like Anom. In this case, teams that overperform can be a net benefit and allow you to run weaker units on the other sides. Not even mentioning MOC has buffs and Anomaly Arbitration has debuffs. So just by the scoring system alone and the nature of MOC, MOC's Starward it's actually not that bad. In combination with the turbulences, the lack of shill and generally being easier to brute force, it's a pretty reasonable task even if you haven't opened Anomaly Arbitration yet, since you can just carry a walking corpse of a team in many different ways. I think MOC Starward is actually a fairly balanced one, at least for now. So let's talk about the actual stage that is debuting with Starward mode in MOC. The Turbulence is follow-up attack and ultimate based with true damage, not really that difficult, so it helps you out in carrying your weaker teams again. The enemies that you need to take care of are Flame Reaver and the new story boss. Both of their HP pools are pretty similar with the current MOC. As you can see, Kafka right now has 5.9 million HP and she doesn't even have self-sacrifice mechanics. These guys have similar HP, so it's pretty okay. The new boss, I don't exactly know if it has some sort of HP reduction gimmick that is similar with Reaver, but as long as it doesn't heal itself, it probably is, just the same, if not easier than Kafka. Then the added third stage is Sparksicon, and boy, this HP looks really high, doesn't it? It has 10 million HP, which is 4% more HP than the Anomaly Arbitration right now that has Sparksy in a night stage, with the first wave having elites that are almost as bulky. There's a very obvious stage here that sticks out like a sore thumb in terms of difficulty, and if you were able to even 6 cycle, on Anomaly Arbitration with Sparksy's Night Stays, you should be able to do at least a maybe 4 to 5 cycle clear on this, accounting for the debuff being replaced by a buff that actually just does damage. Of course, you don't get the final damage bonus buff, but having flat damage is much better. For the first batch of enemies, this is actually pretty fair to start Starward mode with. You can use semi-decent teams for side 1 and side 2, and then use the strongest team that you have against Sparksy. Or you do the opposite and then 0 cycle overkill side 1 and 2, and then use a mediocre team that, it drives the turbulence to carry the side 3. The only thing you have to worry about the weaker team in the side 3 is if they can survive, especially because Sparksy isn't very nice sustain-wise if you're not doing that much damage. Again, there's pretty decent breathing room if you've been playing for a while to clear this. So that's it for MOC. Again, I think this one is pretty fair. The scoring system is on your side, and the only bottleneck is having an old enough account for turbulences and a reasonable amount of damage on 2 sides. Out of all the game modes, I think MOC is pretty okay, even speaking of its future HP increases or whatever. I talked about how I think night stages should just do buffs instead of pure debuffs, and this is kind of the thing that I was talking about. But it's not just that. It really only works because of the scoring system in MOC being so friendly to carrying cost allocation. I wish they would still fix night stages to have buffs, but I don't have much of a problem with Starward MOC outside of the fact that this should be on Anon because it's so much better, which is kind of a compliment, right? Now we move on to Pure Fiction. Oh boy. Pure Fiction started off as a novelty mode to give erudition more value since MOC couldn't shill many things at the same time. And ever since its debut, it has become an AoE playground. It introduced grit mechanics later on, which was, fine, it was easy for a while. But unfortunately, it started to get a lot worse. Grit became more and more specific, and the enemy's HP got a lot higher, to where even AoE queens like Kurta aren't strictly that easy of an option without Eidolons or Sustainless. The selection of enemies evidently also got worse on top of this, with Hule hitting hard and often preventing Sustainless, Ligas healing enemies, and Elation enemies just being really annoying to vault over with so much of their damage reduction. This would be fine on its own like MOC, but combined with the grit mechanics and the fact that because it's AoE you can't use some meta single target or bounce units very well, it ends up being miserable if you just didn't have the shield or high investment. So what changes with Starward mode on Pure Fiction? Well, not much except being very painful. Each team can get a perfect score of 40k, so 120k total. To get 1 star, that's 60k, 75k got 2 star, and 90k for a 3 star. To get the Jades, you need 99k, which we're gonna discuss is very concerning for this mode. Let's evaluate the score system before going into the enemy matchup. This won't take long because I'm saving my breath for the enemy HP lineup being very depressing to look at. The scoring system of PF is not as good as MOC. You can do a very hard carry for 80k and then leave the third one for 19k. But 19k is not exactly a free giveaway. With how grit mechanics are set up, you might not even get any help at all and get stuck at like 15k or something. And in general, having 3 competent AoE teams might be a luxury that some accounts don't really have. Even older accounts like mine, I'm being very wary on if I can do PF on them as a free-to-play. And again, we are assuming 40k PF, which by itself is already kind of a rarity compared to MOC, and not many teams can do it very well. The shilling of grit PF is just so strong that without the shill mechanics, you'll get stuck at like 35k. Even with just decent AoE teams. The enemies have evolved where Sustainless is getting harder, and the structure of PF itself tends to have a lot of RNG due to being a lot of enemies at the same time, which just adds another level of frustration. I'm a bit in the middle ground about the scoring system. Reaching 33k each team is too high of a bar, I think. Because even overperforming teams without shill is a reasonable 38k, which isn't that much of an advantage to be honest. But it's not unreasonably impossible to deal with this scoring by itself. As for the enemies, well, this was not a softball first pitch at all. The first side is Xandar at 56 million HP. This is an AV lock boss, by the way, that heals their own minions. And the second side is Cocolia at 39 million HP, which was identical HP to the Pure Fiction before her, which was kinda nice, I guess. And then Kafka with 49 million HP. The Argenti PF right now is only 30 million HP and has self-destruct mechanics. And Kafka also has 800k HP minions that heal everyone on their second turn, along with the new Elation mob that either randomly CCs or advances enemies in a nightmare blunt rotation with these two. That's very fun for a game mode where inconsistent enemy turns is the devil for high scores, right? So you have two sides that are pretty difficult and one side that is just kinda okay. Genuinely, the best way is to probably just get 40k on side 1 and side 2, then a 19k on side 3, because the HP is just too damn high that you won't reach 19k because the third boss won't be there. But good luck finding a team that can even do 40k in the first place. You can also do it on side 1, because Lygus is a pain to deal with. I assume even people that cleared night stages might get shell-shocked by PF, because it's such a different monster with how much AoE you need. Most accounts at this point have only settled for like 2 decently performing PF teams and the third one might just be out of reach, and you'll have to use weird options like Archer to even go through with it. Unfortunately, unlike this MOC, the Turbulence just gives you stats instead of doing damage for you, so you can't really rely on old characters that have cooked motion values, and you're gonna have to carry using stronger teams that are specifically AoE and specifically matching the Blessing. This is a pretty bad first impression of the mode, to be honest. So, what do I think about Starward PF? Right now, it does seem manageable enough, but because of the scoring and how quickly PF has degraded in terms of shield and HP, only time can tell how awful this can really be. It's not as easy to overperform and as rewarding to overperform compared to MOC for sure. I'm just kinda worried about the future of this game mode with how things have changed recently. For now though, I'm just keeping a close eye on it. Coco Melon gameplay has my attention now, I guess. Last is Apocalyptic Shadow. From the start and even to today, I considered Apocalyptic Shadow to be the best game mode. This is not because it was like generous or easy or anything, but because normal fights are given a lot more effort and redesigned to fit a certain context better. Bosses like Hule, who I usually hate in every other mode, got a complete overhaul that was fun to interact with. Argenti, same thing, and most recently Nikador. There are bosses that barely change from their base form, and those are what I consider very poorly designed, like Skarakabas, but all of that aside, I respect AS for giving old bosses new gimmicks. However, as much as I respect its design intentions, it is very evident that in the most recent AS, that it suffers from the same problems with PF in terms of HP and shilling. And I would consider AS being potentially much worse than night stages in terms of shilling actually. Unless you're break or the specific pool of elements, you're straight up not clearing because you need to match elements and break. Because of this, AS tests your horizontal investment in elemental coverage on top of the added gimmicks. Granted, not all bosses do this, like Bad Academics being hit count based instead of toughness based, but most of them do require breaks in some form. So what changes with Starward mode? Well, it's about as close as you can get to night stages without actually fighting night stages with potentially more shilling. Anomaly Arbitration typically doesn't require you to match elements more so than just to do enough damage. Meanwhile, Apocalyptic Shadow wants you to break on top of that, so good luck. Each team can get a perfect score of 4k, so a cumulative of 12k. To get 1 star, that's 6k, 7.8k gets 2 star, and 9.9k for a 3 star. To get the Jades, you need 10.2k, which we're gonna discuss on how concerning the scoring system is. Let's evaluate the score system before going into the enemies, which is gonna affect Apocalyptic Shadow much more. The scoring system of Apocalyptic Shadow with these requirements is a tiny bit worse than Pure Fiction in my opinion. The bare minimum to simply beat the boss with 0 AV left is 2k, meaning even a poor performance like 1000 AV left can give you 3k. And you can compensate on the other sides with 7.2k, which is 3.6k each, which is the average for very strong teams that are up to date and a good matchup. And if you want to have equal performances on all three, you need 3.4k, which honestly isn't that bad. But this is ignoring the fact that AS is Shield City. It's safe to say that against some combination of Apocalyptic Shadow bosses, getting a huge enough roster to do a 3.4k on each side with modern HP values as a free-to-play is pretty difficult. Pure Fiction isn't easy to full score at all, but getting 40k isn't impossible, at least if you do have the strongest units. In Apocalyptic Shadow's case, even strong teams can get walled by the element lock and get stuck at around maybe 3.5k to 3.7k, just because the fight doesn't work to their advantage. So you just have less capability to carry a weaker side like MOC's 0 cycles or full scoring PF added to the elemental locks the mode already has. There are some bosses that thankfully with enough investment can get relatively close, like 3.9k with Reaver being very infamous, but those are pretty rare and I would say is just as accessible to as much units as a 40k Pure Fiction. So you're usually going to be in the Goldilocks zone of 3k to 3.6k score most of the time, with a weaker team not being able to stretch lower than 1k AV left if you don't have shield to break the ceiling. In which case, I would say that for Apocalyptic Shadow, there really is no carrying, and much like a Night Rotation, you do want 3 teams that reasonably have enough damage and tackle mechanics, otherwise it's going to crash and burn if even just one of your teams is going to be weak. Let's talk about the enemies. Thankfully, unlike Pure Fiction, AS gave us some free sweets to down the bitter taste of the future of this mode. As you can see with the Blessing already, it has action advances which helps a lot in the scoring system. There's CC dispelling and increases ultimate damage by 25%, which is very generic. The first boss is Icor Memo Sprite, which just got redesigned to shield Ashvale, but still gets eaten alive by Finon and Break. The next is Cocolia. Cocolia's toughness bars are so tiny that she is considered one of the easiest Apocalyptic Shadow bosses, if not, no, she's actually just the easiest Apocalyptic Shadow boss. She's also a freebie with her type resistances having so many meta DPS, just wailing at her. And the last boss of this rotation is Reaver. Like I said before, if you have an actual strong enough team, Reaver is one of the rare cases you can get a 3.9k score without that much effort and much more accessible than any other boss to do with. The HP of these bosses is also shockingly low. The Icor Memo Sprite only has 6 million. For context, the current Sparksy boss has shared HP for 14 million, so it's already much easier. And then the other bosses have an estimated HP of 6.5 million. So could be lower or higher, but even then, it wouldn't be crazy if it was 9 million, because as we can see, Skarakabas has 14 million HP. And we're fighting that right now. So damage is not going to be as much of a problem in AS as it will be in PF for now. So you can very easily do a 3.6k on Cocolia with a relatively low investment 3.x team, 3.9k Reaver with a great team, leaving you with 2.7k or 700 AV left for the Icor Memo Sprite boss. Again, thank you Reaver for allowing that. Otherwise, you would need more than 1k AV left if you didn't have a good enough team to do 3.9k total score, which in this selection of bosses, I think is actually pretty fair. So, what about Starward Apocalyptic Shadow? They did right with a very smooth introduction, it has low HP, the turbulence is really good, and it's not really too hard on the shilling or breaking, surprisingly compared to the current content. Again, I am very worried about the future of AS, since it's been in a similar path as PF until this one. And with how chill APOC can be, it might get more toxic than some night stages just because of the elemental locks. But is the first one actually balanced and pretty good? Yeah, it is. I just think that it has the potential to be a lot worse than Pure Fiction. While Pure Fiction is worse right now. We're just seeing a delayed mask-off moment for AS, to be honest. But maybe I'm being too negative and Starward mode bosses will be like Reaver and Cocolia, who aren't that difficult or chill to make up for the fact that you need 3 teams. Who knows? I hope that's right. So yeah, I guess that's all. MOC is the only one I actually think is fair for the mode because the scoring is very friendly to the player. Pure Fiction and Apocalyptic Shadow have been getting worse recently and I'm kind of concerned. Pure Fiction is going to be worse off in the short term with how it debuts, while Apocalyptic Shadow is easing the difficulty a little to make people used to it before probably being worse than PF or even night stages in terms of shilling. Anyway, those are my thoughts for the Starward mode in all of the endgame modes. I'm looking forward to actually trying it, and again, it is optional. You are missing out on barely one pull on one endgame cycle. But if we know anything about this game, it's a give it and take it, so don't be surprised if the weekly Jades take a hit to accommodate it or something. I also think they should have just added more incentives to anything below the perfect score. And I don't mean Jades or like resin. but the bragging rights. The medal being locked for full player doesn't feel very good. Just make it like Anom where you get a bronze medal for a 1-star or something. But yeah, I'll see you guys next time. Like, share, do the algorithm stuff. I hope you like this longer video. And I'll see you on Friday. I guess I'm gonna do some piloting streams, yeah? Bye!